Hello friends, welcome to today's daily devotion. I'm Kerry Wood, pastor of the Goldston Methodist Church in Goldston, North Carolina, and we are a global Methodist congregation, and beginning this week and moving forward in our series on Big Questions, Bigger Answers, we are looking at things from a global Methodist specific point of view. And so the question of what are the sacraments? In the Global Methodist understanding, there are two: baptism, which we've spent most of this week talking about so far, and Holy Communion. Well, today let's look at Holy Communion. And our bigger answer comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, reading verses 26 through 28. Hear now these words. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Now, yesterday I talked about how Paul makes the connection between the Jewish experience of circumcision to the Christian experience of baptism. And here in Matthew, Jesus is taking another very, very Jewish thing, and he is putting a new interpretation, a new understanding that is highly Christian to that Jewish experience. What is the Jewish experience? It's the Passover. The Passover is the thing that God told the Jews to do as Moses was attempting to bring the people of Israel out of their slavery in Egypt. The very last plague was the killing of all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. But if the Jews were to put the blood of a sacrificial lamb onto their doorpost, they would put it on the side, the top, and the side, then the angel of death would pass over that house and spare those people. And so, the festival of the Passover is the festival of remembrance of how God delivered the Jews from slavery and escape from death, and they became the wandering people in the Exodus and then eventually settled into the promised land. And it was the lamb sacrifice, the blood sacrifice, that saved them. And so now, thousands of years after Moses, the Jews are still celebrating the Passover. And here Jesus is doing a Passover meal with his followers in this upper room, and he is taking the bread, which was part of the Passover ceremony. It is a unleavened bread, a flat bread, a cracker, so to speak. And he breaks the cracker, and he says, "This is my body." And I'm wondering if on that very first night when Jesus did this, if all of the apostles looked at Jesus and then looked at each other, were like, "What did he just say?" They're not supposed to eat the bread under that understanding. And what does it mean when he says this is his body? But they took it and they ate it because they wanted to obey what their teacher told them to do. But then when he took up the cup, that was even more controversial, because what he took up was known as the cup of Elijah. This was the cup that was poured and then nobody drank from it, because this was reserved for when Elijah would come, because they believed Elijah was going to come as the predecessor to the coming of the Messiah. And now Jesus has claimed the Elijah cup, and not only has he picked it up, he's telling everybody to drink from it, which symbolizes that Elijah has arrived and is pointed to the Messiah. And Jesus startles them again when he says, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Now, they knew that Jesus had the authority to forgive sins. They had seen him say that and express that through healing people and declaring that their sins had been forgiven. But now Jesus says there's something special about this cup, this wine, for it is my blood. Now, Christians have gotten all caught up on whether this is really the blood and the body, the flesh of Jesus. That's what the Roman Catholic interpretation is that these are truly Christ's body and blood, which is why they are so particular about how they hold it, consume it, and express their worship around it. We as Methodists, we are not caught up on whether this is transubstantiation, transfiguration, or any other fancy highfalutin theological word. What we as Methodists believe is that the very real presence of Christ is with us as we partake in this holy meal. Now, we only baptize once, but we take communion lots. Because Jesus said, "Take and eat, this is my body. Drink from it, this is my blood." And he never said, it's just one time and that's enough. But rather we begin to understand that every time we eat and drink and remember his sacrifice, it does something in us and for us. And so John Wesley wrote a whole sermon around this called The Duty of Constant Communion. And he suggests that we take every opportunity to celebrate this holy meal that we can. And somehow, even in the Methodist movement, we've gotten away from that and think, once a month, that's probably plenty. Because after all, I don't want to make it too common. It might lose its specialness. That's just an excuse. We need to get back to realizing the power of communion and receiving it much more often. Because after all, don't we want God's grace? And I'll see you tomorrow for our next daily devotion.